So Reiner, my question to you is this. What are your plans for trying to solve these problems for the people of Tucson, really for the people of the southwest part of the United States?
Well, I think I personally can only resolve these issues if I were to be reinstated. And that could be a lengthy process, and that will depend on a number of factors. As you know, the dean had accused me of falsification of records. Now, just to make absolutely clear, first of all, there was no falsification of records ever involved in anything. No medical record, no legal record was ever changed. However, what I found out is when I left office, I wanted to make sure that everything was in order and correctly done. So I inquired about the transfer numbers, and very much to my surprise, I found misuse. That the hospital had entered information incorrectly and reported to a federal agency, to UNOS, incorrect data. So I called someone from the hospital to my office and told him that needs to be corrected. The administration needs to know about it. That was all done, and then the corrections were done. Shortly thereafter, the dean accused me of falsifying records and put me on and suspended me, and then eventually I was terminated for something that is still in effect the way I changed it. So 6 months after the changes were made, they're still there, implying that the change that I made were correctly done. And the changes were made to in such a way that the hospital benefited from every single surgeon who was involved in the programs. So it actually turned out to be a complete travesty, and it was done out of personal hostility, whatever you want to call it, to try to criminalize me, and then on top of that, to silence me. You know, everyone knows what my salary is. If this had been something really egregious and something that would have been considered criminal, you would never put one of the highest paid surgeons in the hospital on leave with pay. So, I mean, I was basically sitting idle, being paid by the taxpayers for something that was just a phony allegation construed by the dean, who did not understand what this was all about. So at the hearing just a few weeks ago, the judge found that the evidence was inaccurate and flawed, and an independent panel will look into it, and I'm very much looking forward to it, because what had happened is I corrected data that were falsely reported to a federal agency that could have gotten surgeons, programs, and the hospital into trouble, and by me correcting it, just the opposite happened. So, I mean, this is almost ridiculous if you look at the matter of this issue. And this again was in retaliation to force me out, to get me out, because he was afraid that in the end my criticism would get at him. And that's what happened even without me being present anymore. As you know, just a couple of weeks after, a very favorable article about the programs that I had built and everything else had appeared in the Arizona Daily Star, in our local and regional newspaper. The dean stepped down or was promoted in a lateral way to a different position that had not existed before, and that, to tell you the truth, no one in the entire state needs. Needless to say, I mean, you need a position that is really tailored for someone, and then the taxpayer is paying $500,000 in salary for it.
Doctor, in a private conversation prior to this taping, you indicated to me that there were a number of doctors, surgeons that you brought into the hospital. What was that number? And then understanding that number, how many of them have been let go or have left?
Right. So under my tenure, about 72 surgeons were hired. Out of those 72 surgeons, about a dozen have already left. And at least another dozen to maybe even 20 are currently interviewing for other positions. So what is at risk is that the chiefs, for example, for the trauma program, the chief for the reconstructive program, and other chiefs that I have brought and brought with a lot of effort to this institution will all leave. And that leaves Arizona, southern Arizona, and Tucson again with what it was 7 or 8 years ago before this team arrived. And medical treatment, good medical treatment, had to be obtained at other places, and people had to travel, long distances to get the treatment that was, and probably still to a certain degree is currently available. Now, in order to see what has happened in 6 months, about at least half of all the major, what we call elective cases, people coming voluntarily to this hospital because they have heard of the reputation of the surgeons, of the programs and so forth, have not come back or have sought treatment at this hospital. And that has, of course, deteriorated also the financial situation of the hospital. Don't forget, this is a hospital that in the past frequently, 35 years ago, was bailed out by the state, by taxpayers' money. And then when Mr. Pivarotto became the CEO, he managed to make this hospital basically stand on its own financially. And now we are looking again at massive support. I mean, many, many ways. The county will be asked to chip in more money for the South Campus, formerly Keynote. And the two full-time surgeons that were there will both leave in July because of all the issues that are going on. So at South Campus, we are looking at a decrease in surgical volume of at least half of what has been done. So this is all no good. This is no good for UOHN. This is no good for the university. It's not good for the city, for our community. It's not good for their state.
I'm mindful that many have come to the hospital because of you and because of a Dr. Robert Poston. I have a very close friend that recently had surgery about 3 years ago. And he was concerned himself about this chest being broken and cracked. And he was able to receive this special robotic-assisted coronary bypass, I believe is what it was called. And he successfully came through. Can you speculate a little bit what would happen at the hospital were that not the case? Apparently that's not the case now, as I understand it.
That is correct. I don't think anyone of the current staff has the surgical skills or the interest to do what Dr. Poston did. This is a highly specialized field with a few specialists in the country. We were very lucky to recruit him, and subsequently Dr. Gargaslu, who is the leading thoracic robotic surgeon. And that was all done in an effort to build the biggest robotic cardiopulmonary thoracic program, not only in the country but in the world. And we were well on our way. And unfortunately, all of this because of envy, greed, personal issues, personal vendettas, hostilities, and so forth. All this has crumbled, and it has crumbled to the detriment again of patients and of citizens in our state.